constructing a sawmill for John Sutter on the South Fork of the American River, discovered gold. News spread like fire, and soon 49ers, as the prospectors were called, poured in from all parts of the world. Quickly populated, California became the 31st state on this day, September 9th, 1850. The Constitution, which prohibited slavery, stated in its preamble, "We, the people of the state of California, grateful to Almighty God for our freedom, in order to secure and perpetuate its blessings, do establish this Constitution."
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD. VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at VCYAmerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Thank you for joining us, and I would like to begin by welcoming new listeners in the Wausau, Wisconsin area, listening over 91.5 on the radio dial. So pleased to offer 24/7 programming of the VCY American Network over a translator activated here just recently. And again, a special word of welcome to those of you in Wausau, 91.5 on the radio dial. Well, friends, today we turn our attention to Israel and the Middle East. It was 11 months ago that Hamas launched a direct assault on Israel, not only killing some 1,400, but also taking many hostages. And just a week ago, Hamas, in cold blood, murdered 6 hostages with a shot to the back of the head. And instead of the condemnation against Hamas, it is Israel that's being blamed and condemned by, well, the likes of President Biden, suggesting that Israel's not doing enough to secure a hostage deal with Hamas. And now this past weekend, the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, is making new demands that Israel release 100 more terrorists serving life sentences. Well, we're going to discuss a number of current issues regarding Israel as Israel is continuing under fire. With us today, Dr. Jimmy DeYoung Jr., speaker, teacher, Mideast guide, and videographer, speaker on Prophecy Today. He lived and worked in Jerusalem for many years before he returned to the States for continued ministry. He's a fully credentialed journalist, has led numerous tours to Israel, and one of the speakers on Prophecy Today. And Dr. DeYoung, thank you for joining us.
Jim, it's so good to be with you again.
So let's first speak to a week ago, hostages being held by Hamas, murdered in cold blood just before the IDF located them in a tunnel.
Yes, and it's amazing how the world is, and our political leaders, even those in Israel, are blaming Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for this happening. And if you know the situation, they've already uncovered, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, already uncovered 300 kilometers worth, probably more than that now, of tunnels. And it's a very difficult process to find these. And they would much rather deal with finding them and rescuing them than dealing from negotiations from a point of view of weakness, because certainly, as you just said, Hamas is extending every time they go to the table, and everybody, and they find the diplomacy going to Qatar, going to France, going to the United States, coming to Egypt, doing all of those things. Every time Israel makes some concessions. Now, they can't give up too much, because if they give up too much space, then Hamas really will then reload again. And every time they do that, Hamas has gone to the table and said, no, we're making more demands. And as a matter of fact, Yahya Sinwar's computer that they just encoded and looked at the information on that computer, they publish those transcripts, and they're looking to extend the war. They want to continue this war to keep Israel on its edge. And Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli government has so much to deal with. You've got 50% of the country that every time you cannot make a right decision. You got other 50% of the country, half the country, saying, let's finish the job. So it's a very difficult process of what Prime Minister Netanyahu is under right now.
You know, I found it very interesting. I mean, it's reported that the tunnel shaft entrance leading to this tunnel where these hostages were brutally executed originated in a child's bedroom.
Yes, and Jim, that's not the only. I mean, they're in the nurseries, preschool, the schools, the mosque location, places of religion, that where the Muslims go to worship. They put them in those places because, again, people need to realize what you're dealing with here is pure evilness. And I think people are now starting to wake up to it. Some people are. But we're still, and when I say we, I say that in the collective because I feel like I spent most of my life in Israel. I've worked a lot with a lot of Israeli guides in the land. I lived there. My parents lived there starting in 1991, right after the first Gulf War. So when we say we, I feel like I'm a part of them. But when, the rest of the world doesn't understand that we're not dealing with people that are dealing on a normal level and a way of how you would expect people to deal in these situations. And that's indicative of the fact that on October 7th and how they attacked innocent civilians and the way they went about it. And now we're seeing, and then the 6 hostages that were very close to being rescued had spent months in tunnels that they had very little oxygen, very little food, no light. And they put up a resistance themselves, these young men, and that's the great thing about, and anybody would. I believe that in any type of situation anybody's held in a hostage situation, you would put up some sort of a fight to get back to see your loved ones, your families, to survive. They had survived almost 7 months in those tunnels of pure evilness, and they were shot at the last second. And that seemed to embolden the nation of Israel. Israel was really sorrowful for those. I mean, that was just like, we're right on the cusp of rescuing them, and then all of a sudden they're shot, and they know how soon it was that they were shot right before they were going to be rescued.
And this is why it's so disturbing, Brother DeYoung, that, last Monday, as President Biden was coming off yet another vacation, and this time it was 2 weeks, just coming off the beaches of Delaware, in which he said Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, was not doing enough to secure a hostage deal.
Yes. The interesting thing, it's always easier when you're from a place of protection, as the President of the United States is afforded. He should be. Candidates and politicians are afforded that luxury of being protected. But they're the ones that don't seem to be on an intensity level of being able to make decisions to further this. And it's easy to cast stones at people that are dealing with it every single day. And I guarantee you, and I know, Jim, that Prime Minister Netanyahu did an interview with Fox News, and he had made some statements that it's not us. We're coming to the table. We're trying to make as many concessions as we can, but it's not Israel, and it's not me pertaining to Prime Minister Netanyahu. It's Hamas that does not want peace, and that is the case and so many times over and over from day to day.
I do have a clip here of Israel's Prime Minister in addressing this criticism. Here's what he had to say.
I was asked whether I'm not doing enough to the release of hostages. Well, I want to set the record straight. On April 27th, Secretary of State Blinken said that Israel made an extraordinarily generous offer for a hostage deal. On May 31st, Israel agreed to a U.S.-backed proposal. Hamas refused. On August 16th, Israel agreed to what the United States defined as a final bridging proposal. Hamas refused again. On August 19th, Secretary Blinken said, Israel accepted the U.S. proposal. Now Hamas must do the same. On August 28th, that's 5 days ago, Deputy CIA Director said that Israel shows seriousness in the negotiations. Now Hamas must show the same seriousness. I want to ask you something. What has changed in the last 5 days? What has changed? One thing. These murderers executed 6 of our hostages. They shot them in the back of the head. That's what's changed. And now after this, we're asked to show seriousness? We're asked to make concessions? What message does this send Hamas? It says, kill more hostages, murder more hostages, you'll get more concessions. The pressure internationally must be directed at these killers, at Hamas, not at Israel. We say yes, they say no all the time, but they also murdered these people. And now we need maximum pressure on Hamas. I don't believe that either President Biden or anyone serious about achieving peace and achieving the release would seriously ask Israel to make these concessions. We've already made them. Hamas has to make the concessions. Thank you very much.
Brother Jimmy, he in essence is saying you're pointing the fingers at the wrong person here.
Yeah. And you could hear the passion in his voice. He also did say, he said, I'm not interested in my political future. I'm interested in my country's future. And that was so very important. And Jim, sometimes we think back, and of course you knew my father very well, and he had many times on this program. Over the years, we had many times where we were in the same presence, in the same room, interviewing Prime Minister Netanyahu for different television programs and different media outlets. And I've known him over the past, you kind of, Jerusalem is a small location, and you run into him in restaurants and places like this. I would have to agree that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not in it for his political future. He's already established as the longest-sitting prime minister his role and what people in the future will look back and judge him on. And he knows he's going to have to. It was on his watch what took place on October 7th. And so when you hear that passion in his voice, and he says, I'm not interested in my political future, I'm interested in my country's future, you have to believe that he at least is doing everything that he can to get all the rest of the hostages released and to finish the job.
At the same time, you've got this cold-blooded killing by Hamas again, and there's also a Hamas leader abroad, his name Khalid Mashal, saying, and I believe he spoke this from Istanbul, Turkey, he said, we want to return to martyrdom operations, calling for martyrdom to take place. Some people term lone wolf attacks, but turning people into martyrs. Go kill as many Israelis as you can.
And it's going to happen. It's happening in Europe, and we see that on a weekly basis, almost on a daily basis. We see it in Germany. We see it in France. We see it in England. Europe has been inundated with all these immigrants that have come across the channel, come across the waters of the Mediterranean, and immigrated into, and Europe is really could be on its last leg. Now, we know what Bible prophecy talks about. As of right now, Islamic jihad is taking place in Europe, and it's going to come to America. And you're absolutely right. They could call these and they can make these statements from Istanbul, which, by the way, Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, he wants to be the pan-Islamic leader of the world. He wants to be the leader of the Islamic nations, and Turkey, along with Iran and Egypt and Syria and Libya and all these other nations, are going to be a part of those nations that come against Israel. But when these statements are being made in these countries, you're starting to see that they're calling for Islamic jihad, holy jihad against Israel, the Jewish people. And the Jews, our good friends, those that we interview on our program, they say, look, they're coming for us now, but in the future, they're going to come for you.
Dr. Jimmy DeYoung Jr. with us today on Crosstalk as Israel continues under fire. Back in 1 minute here on the VCY America Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist and president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, Why is helium so much lighter than the other gases?
Chris, helium is lighter because it's a smaller atom, far smaller than any other gas except hydrogen. There's a very interesting lesson we can learn from this. We know how many atoms of helium are out there from a direct observation. We also know how fast helium is produced below the Earth's surface and how fast it enters the atmosphere. By doing simple division, we can see that all of the helium that's in the atmosphere would get here in a rather short period of time, far too short to have allowed for evolution to occur. Once again, Chris, we see that the scientific evidence supports the biblical way of thinking and not the evolution way of thinking. Back to Genesis wins again.
To find out more about creation science, visit us on the web at www.icr.org. That's www.icr.org.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Dr. Jimmy DeYoung Jr. is with us today, and he is one of the speakers on Prophecy Today. And prophecytoday.com is a website, correct, Brother Jimmy?
That's correct.
Prophecytoday.com. You'll find a number of resources there, not only current resources, but also past messages that your dad has spoken.
Past messages. We do an hour-and-a-half weekend program, Prophecy Today Weekend, where we interview newsmakers, our people that we have in the European Union, and Russia, and Israel, from around the world that come on the program and help us to examine current events in the light of God's prophetic word.
Again, friends, it's prophecytoday.com. Brother Jimmy, we were just talking about this martyrdom and being called for martyrs, to come forward really and do their gruesome acts. And I just had a story come to me today from the Palestinian Media Watch about a mother from Gaza who is literally cheering martyrdom of her 4 sons. And she was probed about this. She's saying, and I quote, "Praise Allah, we are proud and consider them, my sons, martyrs with Allah. We consider them martyrs with Allah." How many? She was asked. 4, and I'm proud of that. I don't have even 1 son now. That's it. All 4 are gone. We consider them martyrs for Allah. She said, I don't have even 1 son now. All 4 are gone. Why am I cheering? Because my children are in paradise. This is an honor for me. That's her mindset.
Yes, Itamar Marcus does a fantastic job with Palestinian Media Watch, and he understands what they are saying, what they're promoting, what they're saying to their people. And, to be fair, education is very key. And, this mother who thinks that her sons are now sitting in paradise, that's what they are taught from day one. We've been in some of those refugee camps, and they're held there not by the world, not by Israel, but by the Palestinians. Formerly it was Yasser Arafat, and now it's Hamas and Fatah that keep these people in these camps and keep their thumb on them, so that this is what they think. And of course, this is the thought process that they go through. Like, they consider themselves the greatest honor is to give birth to sons that will fight for holy war, holy jihad, Islamic jihad. And so that is a thought process that does go through their head. And you're taught that from day one when you're young, and that's why they want to get it in control of the kids first from very early on in age, and they're taught that their whole life. And that's how that lady can say this now, that, look, it's an honor to send my 4 sons to die for the cause of Allah.
My. Dr. DeYoung, what can you tell us about the Philadelphia corridor? I know that the Prime Minister of Israel insisting that Israel maintain control of this corridor, yet others are saying that Israel should withdraw from them. Tell us about this corridor. Why is it so important?
Yeah, this is one of the negotiation points that Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't want to give an inch on. During a press briefing to foreign media on Wednesday night of last week, Prime Minister Netanyahu reiterated his stance that Israel cannot abandon this 7.8-mile-long Philadelphia corridor along the border between Gaza and Egypt without first implementing a viable plan to prevent weapons smuggling into the Gaza Strip. this was used. There are more tunnels, big tunnels, that were used, and this is right at the southern end of the Gaza Strip. It's a almost 8 mile long corridor that they had all these tunnels that were smuggling weapons into the Gaza Strip. Not only weapons, and that's rockets, missiles, guns, all the implements for, building these tunnels, the concrete that was brought in, suitcases of cash money that was being brought in. This was a very lucrative venture between the Hamas and the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and Egypt. And Israel does not want to give that up. If they give it up right now, and here's why it's so important at this point. Of course, we understand that process. We know we have miles and miles of border between us and Mexico, and we know how difficult it is to patrol that. I mean, just think of what's there in this corridor, that they have blown these tunnels up, that, you could drive vehicles in these tunnels. This was a corridor. This was like a main highway, not just one, but several tunnels that would come through on this corridor. If Israel gives up, for sure, and gets it back into the hands of Hamas under the control of the Palestinian Authority or whomever it's under control in the Gaza Strip, besides Israel, this is a very location where they could smuggle the rest of the hostages out to Iran or to Yemen or to Qatar, and then Israel doesn't have control over where the hostages are. Right now, they have control. They know that they're still in the Gaza Strip. They have not been smuggled out. But you give that control of that corridor back over, you might as well just be saying, look, come on in and do the same thing again. My.
Well, there's also new demands on Israel for a ceasefire right now, and we understand that the Hamas leader, the Yahya Sinwar, is actually demanding that Israel release an additional 100 more terrorists who are serving life sentences. And Israel sources right now say that puts the odds of a deal at close to zero. How can Israel just let go of these terrorists serving life terms in Israel?
Well, they can't, and that's the bottom line, and that's where you say enough is enough. That's where they draw. There's certain people that they cannot release. Now, they've done this in the past. They've also released prisoners to get other hostages in the past. Now, this was before October 7th. There were other IDF soldiers that were kidnapped, and they were held, and whether they were alive or dead, Israel would make concessions to release these prisoners. They know who they are. They know where they're going to go. They know that they're going to go back. Israel will keep a tab on them, will watch them, will re-arrest them. But there have been many of these terrorists that have been released in these hostage deals. But there are some that there's a line that they say, no, we're not releasing this one back into society. We're not letting this one go. And I think that's the bottom line. And it just shows, again, what you're dealing with. You're basically, they're asking, when Israel makes a concession and comes to and offers a very good deal, whatever that deal was, and I'm not privy to that information, the real details, the nitty-gritty details, but whatever that deal was, Israel had made major concessions to get to that point. They said, no, we're not going to release this. But that's what Hamas does. They're like, well, we need an additional 150 of our terrorists released. And you just can't deal with people like that.
You can't. And again, just how disheartening it is for the President of the United States to imply that Israel is not doing enough. And it's not only the U.S. criticizing Israel. The U.K. is also suspending some of their arms sales to Israel. And I have a statement here from the U.K. Foreign Secretary David Lammy. Here's what he had to say.
It is with regret that I inform the House today the assessment I have received leaves me unable to conclude anything other than that for certain UK arms exports to Israel, there does exist a clear risk that they might be used to commit or facilitate a serious violation of international humanitarian law. I have informed my right honourable friend, the Business and Trade Secretary, and he is therefore today announcing the suspension of around 30 from a total of approximately 350 to Israel as required under the Export Controls Act. These include equipment that we assess is for use in the current conflict in Gaza.
So here we have Israel again being targeted by the UK, and Israel is simply seeking to have the right to exist.
Yes, and following a brief pause, by the way, the UK also resumed its funding to the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, despite Israel's allegations that some of its staff were involved in the terrorism of October 7th. In August, the United Nations declared that 9 UNRWA employees suspected of involvement in the Hamas attack on Israel were terminated from their positions. So here you have an organization that, basically the United States supports, which Donald Trump, when he was president, wanted to cut the funding to the United Nations. Here, this organization is a part of this. So the UK, and you have politicians that are making these decisions that don't understand the role that Israel plays in the Middle East, and they think that Israel is being the aggressor in this situation. Should this happen in London? Should this happen in Manchester? Or should this happen in any one of the cities around England? Maybe they would understand, and they very well could understand the future because of what's taking place with immigration into the UK.
Okay, and the protests continue on our university campuses against Israel. Here's just one brief clip from Georgetown University. And on they go. They went their chants for quite some time, holding their speeches. We see what's taking place on the university campuses, saying, we're not going to relent, we're not going to give up. We haven't lost steam over the summer. And then also we have Governor Walz, running mate to Kamala Harris, telling a Michigan radio station that demonstrators are, quote, speaking out for all the right reasons. What right reasons is he talking about?
Yeah. Well, it's how they were educated. Their thought process, certainly not one that would be like-minded of us. And I think that you're starting to see. And I was interesting way back, and you just wonder sometimes why God takes you in certain directions. But I was a part of working with and producing a program for the Jewish Defense League, which Rabbi Meir Kahane, who was assassinated in New York City. Rabbi Meir Kahane was a part of that. They established these organizations that would fight for Jews that were not in the land of Israel, outside the land of Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. Now you're starting to see on these campuses and in certain areas, you're starting to see the Jewish Defense League and men like that come back in. And all you need to do is stand up to these, to these people that are protesting. I'm not encouraging anybody to go out and get into a fight. That's a fight that, you're going to get this on all these bastions of higher learning that are liberal in their thinking. They're going to allow this to keep going, and this is the future for what we have for America, and that's a sad part.
It is sad, and friends, it's happening on university campuses all over. Again, the Harvard protesters chanting, "Long live the Intifada." And even in the days after the October 7th attack, coalition, some 34 Harvard student organizations released a statement blaming Israel for the attack that Hamas launched against Israel. And Dr. DeYoung, also, we know just over the weekend here, a Jordanian truck driver murdered 3 Israeli guards at the crossing between Jordan and Israel.
Yes, and I've been through that crossing probably 30 or 40 times. I think I took some of your people through from those that came with us through Crosstalk and through VCY that went to Israel. We've been through that. That's a corridor where a lot of people go through to Jordan. It's the old Allenby Bridge that is used, and that's how you would go back and forth. And yes, now even that. And I would like to talk to you about how Jordan now, the king of Jordan, is taking a different stance on what's taking place in Israel.
Let's talk about that after the break. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Back in 1 minute. Our guest today, Dr. Jimmy DeYoung, Jr.
Crosstalk as we know it began airing in 1987.
Good afternoon to you, Vic.
Eliason here. We are going to be talking today with...
It comes your way from the VCY America network out of Milwaukee. Did you ever wonder what the letters VCY stand for? Ever pondered what's behind the ministry that presents Crosstalk every day? We're pleased to share with you a free copy of the magazine formatted book, God's Continuing Miracle, The VCY Story. This book of over 200 pages presents nearly 500 photographs, interviews, historic newspaper articles, and writings about the VCY America ministry, now over 60 years old. The magazine will also inform you about VCY rallies, the Birthday Club ministry, the VCY bookstore, and so much more. It is a testimony to God's faithfulness. To receive a free copy of God's Continuing Miracle, The VCY Story, call 1-800-729-9829.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Dr. Jimmy DeYoung Jr., our guest today. Israel continues under fire, our topic today, and it's happening on many, many fronts. As we mentioned, the tragedy, not only of October 7th, but also just a week ago, just as 6 hostages were near to be, released. Released. They were shot in cold blood in the back of the head. And we see also the unfolding over the weekend of what happened in a Jordanian truck driver murdering 3 Israeli guards at the crossing between Jordan and Israel. And Dr. Jimmy DeYoung, you mentioned things are changing between Israel and Jordan at this time?
Yes. When you look back over the history of Israel and Jordan, of course, there was still declared war between Israel and Jordan up until 1996, and then Israel and Jordan signed a peace treaty, peace agreement, which allowed those people from Israel to go to Jordan and allowed those from Jordan. Now, let me give you a little back history on this. Up until 1967, when you had the reuniting of a divided city, the city of Jerusalem, the country of Jordan had its tanks up on the Mount of Olives. The Mount of Olives is right across the Kidron Valley. It's probably less than 3,000 feet from the top of the Mount of Olives to where the Dome of the Rock is, or where the first and second temples stood in the city of Jerusalem. And back then, Abdel Nasser from Egypt started talking about war, and he wanted to attack, and of course all of his Islamic brothers took him up on it. Israel told Jordan, if you don't attack, we won't bother you. We'll just defend. Of course, Jordan sided with their Islamic brothers, and the Arab brothers attacked Jerusalem. Israel pushed Jordan all the way back to the Jordan River. So where this crossing is very close to Jericho. It's very close to the baptismal site of where Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist, which is only 30 feet across from the borders of Israel, across the water of the Jordan River to Jordan. There's a bridge there, the Allenby Bridge, and this is the location. It's operated by the Port Authority of Israel, the Israeli Airport Authority. Trucks go through there on a daily basis. Jordanians that lived on what is now the Israel side of Jordan calls it the West Bank. It's the West Bank of the Jordan River. And so now Jordanians can freely travel back and forth. Israelis go down there, not in numbers as they used to, because they wanted to get to the city of Petra, but tourists that come, they will cross over to go to Amman and then up to Mount Nebo and then down to Petra. So it's a very busy area. And now this situation that took place changes the thought process, because King Abdullah is the king he's from the Hashemite kingdom from Saudi Arabia, who was put in control, the Hussein family was put in control of Jordan. King Hussein, his father, was a close friend of the Israeli government and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And when situations took place in the past, King Hussein would fly his own jet over and be there to get on his knees and ask for forgiveness. King Abdullah has not done that yet, has not even condemned this attack. As a matter of fact, they're heralding this young man, this 39-year-old truck driver, who shot 3 men that were in their late 50s, early 60s, had families. One had a son who was kidnapped on October 7th, and he survived and came out. And here his father gets killed on the border. So you can see it's a very, very tense situation right now in Israel.
Dr. Jimmy DeYoung Jr. with us here today. And yet another front, Hezbollah, we understand, is making almost daily attacks on northern Israel from Lebanon.
Yes, they are. 10,000 missiles, rockets, drones have been shot across the border up in the north. Cities were evacuated. A lot of those people have been living in hotels that would be usually used to house tourists that would come to Israel. Tourism has basically stopped. I was there in May with a couple of SEAL team members and state troopers from the state of Maine. I went there. They wanted to see what was going on, but I could tell you this, there was very few tourists in the country. The hotels were filled with these families that have been evacuated out of the northern cities because of the rockets that were being shot across the border. 10,000 have come across since October 7th. That's only 1/10 of the amount of rockets that are now aimed at Israel on the northern border. The IDF has been preparing, and they've made a statement that at a moment's notice, as soon as they get the green light, they can be crossing and doing operations in Lebanon within minutes. So everybody's prepared. The people of Lebanon are suffering. These are not the people that were born and bred and lived in Lebanon. They are suffering at the hands of allowing Hezbollah, an Islamic organization, a proxy of Iran, to come into the land and to take over the land. And a lot of the Lebanese people have left, have gone elsewhere, to the United States, to Europe, to other places in the world because of what's going to take place. But we're sitting right now, and you've got Hezbollah not only on the border of Israel watching what they're doing, they're on the border between Israel and Syria. If you know anything about the north, you've got Lebanon to the west, you've got Syria more central, and then you could keep going over, and Hezbollah is now on the border between Israel and Syria, watching the IDF prepare for an attack and trying to learn. And I do think that we're going to see something big take place. Now, the Israeli Air Force is attacking on a nightly basis, places, weapons depots in Lebanon, and they're striking these, trying to limit the collateral damage. But at a certain point, it's just going to be when war starts in the north. It's already started, but when Israel crosses that border and starts doing operations in Lebanon, it's going to get really ugly. In fact, one general said, we're going to make Beirut look like, now remember, Beirut was called the French Riviera of the Mediterranean. It was beautiful in the 70s, beautiful location, beautiful city, but he said, we're going to make Beirut look like the Gaza Strip.
My. So you're talking about ground invasions from Israel into Lebanon?
It could happen at any moment. They're ready. All it takes is the green light from the government to go in. So, they're doing more than just rattling their saber swords. They are ready to go, Jim, and they're not going to let what happened on October 7th happen in the north again.
All right. Friends, we're going to open our phone lines. Our number 800-733-9829. Dr. Jimmy DeYoung Jr. with us today. Their website, prophecytoday.com. Again, our number 800-733-9829. Your questions or brief comments. Dr. DeYoung, I see also that I saw a headline come through, and I said, I got a copy off the story. It was from CBN, but here's a headline. Archaeologists discover a rare, beautiful, ancient seal near the site of Solomon's Temple. We understand this is from some 2,700 years ago, from the time after King Solomon commissioned and built the first Jewish temple.
Yes. What's interesting is life still goes on. I talked about being there in May, and I was watching, and we went through the tunnels down there that they're still excavating the area outside where the temple stood, where the city of David was, where David had his palace, and of course Solomon, grew up and was around there. And they keep finding these artifacts that put a stamp of approval that archaeologists are proving that Israel, that was the Jewish temple that was there. Now remember, the Palestinians are saying, no, that's not the Jewish temple. It was our temple. Why do they say that? Because King Herod was an Idumean. His mother was an Edomite. And I can trace today for you from the Palestinians of today all the way back to the Edomites of Esau and Jacob. So here they're saying, no, that wasn't the Jewish temple, but yet archaeologists keep finding these emblems, these seals that they find rings, grommets from the rabbis, the high priest robes that they have found in those areas. And it's amazing when they start uncovering the ground. In fact, they could do that all over the old city. The old city is about a mile square today. If they uncovered that whole area, you would see artifacts going back, archaeological digs, finding items that belong to the Jewish people from when the temple was there. And I think that is so important that when and again, archaeology is an evolving science. Every time they uncover the ground, they bring up parts and pieces, and it says, "Oh yes, here we could trace this back to the time of King Solomon." Right. I mean, that's amazing.
It is amazing. Our lines are filled, by the way, but give us a word about the Temple Mount. We know things are always tense there.
Well, we always go back to the Bible. Zechariah chapter 12, verse 2 says that holy mountain of God, referred to in the Scriptures 16 times, the Temple Mount in the city of Jerusalem, Mount Moriah, that place is going to become a cup of trembling. People are going to be intoxicated with power over the control. Today, it's the third most holiest site in Islam behind Mecca and Medina. And then you have Al-Aqsa, or the Temple Mount in the city of Jerusalem. It's the number one holiest site. I believe it's the holiest spot on the earth. And that's where Jesus Christ will rule and reign from in the future. But, yes, there's a control for power there. And Prime Minister Netanyahu just told any of his ministers and any Knesset member to be able to go up there. Now, there's been an increase of Jews going up to pray, and now they can even start to pray. They have a special location on the Temple Mount where Jews can lay down and say their prayers for the rebuilding of the next temple. But Prime Minister Netanyahu said, look, I don't want any of my government officials going up there unless they ask me first. Again, it's just indicative of the control and this being intoxicated with power.
Let's begin with Chris calling in today. Hi, Chris, you're on the air.
Hey, Jim, thanks for taking my call. My comment was, I believe that the Gaza Strip should have been upended long before October 7th. And what I mean is, I believe that, and this is just my opinion, but I believe that the Gaza Strip should have been upended in the wake of the 1972 terrorist attack at the Olympics. We all remember where the Palestinians slaughtered 11 Israeli athletes. I read that story. It was brutal. I think that Golda Meir, and I commend Golda Meir for going after the masterminds of the plot, but I think they should have flatlined Gaza from one end to the other, evacuated all the people, and just said, we're done with you guys, and we're going to flatline Gaza, and we're going to make it Tel Aviv number 2. And that's my comment.
Okay, thank you for that, Chris. Any comment there, Jimmy?
Yeah, Chris, great. It's a great thought. Israel, again, is trying to show the world that, look, we are trying to live, and we're trying to coexist with our Palestinian friends. And really, when you use that term Palestinian, that was resurrected by Yasser Arafat. But Israel has been trying to coexist with them, giving them concessions. In fact, 2005, Ariel Sharon allowed and pulled out a religious community that lived in that area, pulled them out of there, and gave that to the Palestinians. So, look, we're trying to live at peace with them. It backfired, certainly backfired in a great way. And over these years, again, politics plays a major role. And, Israel trying to appease the rest of the world. That's the times of the Gentiles, right? The Gentiles are in control of the Jewish people in the city of Jerusalem. Daniel talked about it. Jesus talked about it. It's still in control right now.
And friends, we'll be back with more of your calls after the break. But incidentally, a gunman opened fire at the Israeli consulate in Munich just as a memorial ceremony was taking place for the victims of the Munich Olympics as a massacre, which 11 Israeli athletes were murdered by Palestinian terrorists. Troubling story. Back in a minute.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewtube.com. Recently, Tucker Carlson had on a historian that he praised, and this historian, Cooper is his last name, basically said that Hitler didn't mean to do the Holocaust. It was just poor planning. Well, that is absolutely 100% false, and it fits into the category of being a Holocaust denier. Edwin Black wrote the premier book on this. It's called IBM and the Holocaust. It's about the size of a phone book, and it details exactly how IBM's punch cards were used to track down the Jews, to know everything about them, not only their history, their heritage, being Jewish, but their occupation. And then they cross-referenced those to their bank accounts. Now the United Nations is holding a global conference to do the same thing, give all of us digital ID that's mandatory under their 17 goals of the 2030 agenda. History seems to be repeating itself along with the rise in active euthanasia.
Dr. Jimmy DeYoung Jr., our guest today. Israel continues under fire, and you're welcome to call 800-733-9829. Our call-in number, 800-733-9829. John is next. Hi, John. You're on the air.
Hi. Real quick question. All these leaders are bringing these people in, these peaceful people, quote-unquote. Don't they realize that the leaders are going to be the ones that are toppled? I mean, all you got to do is look at Hitler, Mussolini, at everybody. It's like they go for the people who, whatever. I don't know if that's good thinking or right thinking, but it's like I don't know how stupid people are.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for the call.
That's a great point. But you know what? I'm always reminded, Revelation 17:17, God uses world leaders to accomplish His will. And, we need to stop. We need to be involved in politics. We are. Politics plays an important role. It was established in Genesis chapter 9. But we need to be about looking at what the Lord has for us to do. And politicians, world leaders that don't have the mind of the Lord are going to try to do things that they think is right. And we know that that's not going to work.
Again, our number to crosstalk is 800-733-9829. Randy is next in Dodgeville, Wisconsin. You're on the air, Randy.
Yeah, I was just wondering, could all this potentially lead up to a fulfillment of Psalm 83, where we get kind of a picture where Israel kind of takes care of their bordering nations and all things become peaceful, and that might even be setting up for the Gog Magog.
Okay, thank you for that. Randy?
Very good question, Randy. And I would say this. So I believe that there are no prophecies to be fulfilled. I believe the rapture is the next event to happen on God's calendar. No prophecies are being fulfilled. When we look at current events, we're examining them in the light of God's prophetic word. These are prophecies that will be fulfilled after the rapture of the church. Psalm 83, Daniel 11, and Ezekiel 38, these are all nations. And they all talk about when these nations are going to come against Israel. I believe that it takes place within the first 2 months of the tribulation period. So if we're seeing these nations, and that's a good point that Randy brings out. They come out of that meeting in Psalm 83 and they say we need to wipe Israel off the face of the map, off the face of the earth. And they come out of an agreement, a group of people come together and say that. So, yes, we're seeing those nations. And by the way, Saudi Arabia is a part of that group. Iran's a part of that group. And you combine that with Syria and Egypt and Daniel 11 and the nations of Ezekiel 38. Yes, I believe. And it does say it takes place in a time of peace. But it's not a peace that we know. It's a false peace that the Antichrist brings on the scene.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Peter next in Burbank, California. Peter, you're on the air.
Yes, I just want to make a quick comment. I'm just wondering out loud that no two democracies that we know of have ever gone to war against each other. France, Great Britain, Sweden, Canada, U.S., Israel, Greece, Italy. So we may have disagreements, but we may never go to war except in the history books. So to any, pro-Palestinian listener, tell me what your solution is, and I will listen off the air.
Yeah, unfortunately, those pro-Palestinian people in fact, they're rewriting the history books. and it's a revisionist history, if you will. But when you look at this, you're exactly right. But I think that we've seen other mighty empires fall in the past, and there's nothing to say that the United States, as its empire that has been a nation and has been a mighty country that has seen the gospel go forward from its nation, it's nothing to say that the United States would still be standing, and it very well could fall in this situation.
We've got Don next in Kansas. Hi, Don. You're on the air.
Yes, hi. My comment is I'd like to have some feedback on knowing the history of Jordan. No one ever seems to bring up the fact that Jordan was the original two-state solution. And I know, it caused animosity between the countries, but nonetheless, Jordan, the Hashemite kingdom, was supposed to have been the two-state solution because Jordan was a part of the original Israel, the Promised Land. And I'll take my comment offline.
Great. Thank you, Dr. DeYoung.
You're exactly right. And that's why we like to take people to Jordan, because it was a part of the land of Israel. And up in, I believe it was 1938, 1939, what was known as Transjordan, Israel, of course, got their land in 1948. Transjordan was made, and this would be the true state of the Palestinians. He's exactly right. But Jordan doesn't want any of these Palestinian refugees in their country. But Transjordan was by the United Nations given, and by the Brits who oversaw the land. They oversaw Israel at the same point. Transjordan was given, and they needed to bring in a king to take it. So from the Hashemite kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the Hashemite kingdom, they gave it to King Hussein's father, the elderly King Hussein, who came in, and he was made the patriarch and over the land. And they've grown over the years, but yes, he's exactly right. That is the proper two-state solution, which would be the country of Jordan.
We are just a minute left before airtime ends here, Dr. DeYoung. What's a believer's role and responsibility in such a time as this, in light of the things we've talked about?
Oh, I think that we need to find out what the Lord wants you to be doing during these times. We know how it's all going to play out. It's all listed in God's Word, how things will play out in the future. We're not going to save this earth. This earth will be burned up according to the Scriptures. A new heaven and new earth will be down the road. So our role right now is to be about telling others about Jesus Christ. I would establish, and I've talked about this, we would establish a community of prayer. Be the hands and feet of Jesus. Remember the great commandment, love the Lord thy God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Love thy neighbor as thyself. That's what Jesus said when he was asked that. That's how we, and again, our first responsibility is to bring glory and honor to God the Father in all that we do, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31. By doing that, by bringing glory and honor to God in our lives, in our daily work, in our workplaces where we go, making sure that we do have that answer for God's plan of salvation for all of mankind.
Amen. Amen. Friends, Dr. Jimmy DeYoung Jr. with us today, prophecytoday.com. And Brother Jimmy, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure, Jim. Thank you so much.
Friends, indeed, interesting times that we live in, and indeed we are ambassadors for our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Be a good representative today. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.